How's it going, everyone? Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been getting asked by everyone on Instagram how I do my portrait studies in colour pencil, so today's video I'll be running through my process. Before the start of this year, I was always so scared of drawing people, whether it was because of their likeness, I couldn't get the proportions right, but since I started doing them in miniature versions in this A3 sketchbook, it really helped me overcome that fear. I try to use 2 to 4 pencils in the same colour and then maybe 2 different colours at the same time. I really like this portrait because she looks like she's burning with rage, and I've kind of emulated that with the look of fire with the blue on top and then the burning orange underneath. Sometimes I'll switch it up and use kind of like the colder colours for the shadows and then the warmer colours for like the midtones and highlights, but I often try to let the highlights come through just by using the page. Okay, so to begin with, I'll be using my Faber-Castell Polychromos, which are extortionate prices at the moment, which sucks. You'll see in the clip that there's actually 4 pencils, but I really only end up using 3 of these because when you're drawing these, you can actually emulate a lot of shadow with just the pressure of the pencil. So I begin by mapping out the facial structure with the lightest pencil in that colour. And I don't think it really matters if I make mistakes at this point because I can always rub out, and if you're interested, I'm using a Derwent electric eraser. It's really good for colour pencil, and especially on this paper, it doesn't seem to rip it. I think what really helps me at this stage is just mapping out the shadows as much as possible and making sure all the facial features are in the right place. So I do this line underneath just the ear so I know where the nose is going to be, and then a line in between the ear so I know where the middle of the eyes are going to be, and then another line on the top of the ear so I know where the eyebrows are going to be. And I'll be honest, this is something I'm still really learning with proportions and like face structure. I think I've just developed kind of really good rendering skills, so it makes up for some of the mistakes. Like you can see right now, the portrait looks a bit goofy, the eyes look a bit weird, and I will go back and fix that, but as you start adding the shadows with the same colour, it starts building the face depth up a little bit more. Once I'm happy where all the features are sitting, I'll remove the guidelines so I can start chalking away at the shadows. The way I colour is moving the pencil in single strokes in the same direction, as light as possible, and then building up shadowy areas with more pressure on the pencil. These pencils are really good, and I think people can fall into the trap of pressing too hard and bringing out a lot of colour immediately, but they can blend really nicely into the white when they're such a lighter tone. As I've already mapped out where the shadows are going to be, I'm simply just colouring them in at this point with the same pencil that I used to draw the outlines with. If you're worried about making mistakes, then don't stress. You can just use the pencil as light as possible for a while and then build up more and more layers of the same pencil, and then we can start adding darker tones on soon. You can see what I mean by the pencil pressure in this clip, as if you look at the cheek side or the cheekbone, you can see it's much lighter, and I've really toned down the pressure on that part. And then the lips, I always want the top lip to be quite dark, so I put as much pressure as I can as possible. I also forgot to mention that with my references, I always try to find one that has really striking lighting on one side of the face, or just interesting lighting where it casts a lot of shadows, so the face doesn't appear very flat. And for these studies, I also get my references from Pinterest. I think at this stage it's important as well to remember that I'm not really worried about too much detail. I'm literally just blocking out as much shadow as I can to reveal the facial structure. One thing I lack in these portraits is definitely the hair. I find it quite hard to do still, and I'm definitely still learning that, so if the hair looks pretty rubbish, then that is why. But I think at the moment I'm really focusing on just the face. So using different amounts of pressure on the pencil, you can kind of see the portrait growing already and coming to life. And now I think it's time to use our second pencil and start really adding contrast to this portrait to make it pop. Beforehand, we weren't too bothered about adding detail because we knew we'd do it later, and guess what, it's later now, so we're going to add more detail with the darker tone pencils, but in the same colour. So what I've got now is like a darker pink, and I'll start adding all the details in the eyes and the darker shadows. Again, using single strokes in the same direction really makes the pencil blend into the paper. You'd probably already noticed I like to just block the pupils out and not add them into too much detail, so it kind of still looks illustrative and interesting and stylized rather than too realistic. You'll see on the reference that there are some really dark shadows, so I'm just trying to build these up on top of the existing layer that I put down first. I'm really only colouring some of the midtones and just the shadows. I like to let the highlights speak for themselves through the paper. By doing this, I think the shadows are really easy to carve out as I'm seeing the negative space. I like to really darken the edges of these shadows because I think it emphasises that certain plane of the face and adds even more contrast to the final piece. It's been really enjoyable doing these portraits, as anytime I go online I always see colour pencil drawing tutorials, and I feel like they're always to do with realism, and you would need about like 200 Faber-Castell pencils costing you around like £500 just to be able to do one portrait. And that's no knock on realism. I think it's great and it's such an amazing skill, and probably wish I could do it myself. But I'm here to tell you that you can just use 2 pencils to create great portraits without having to buy these huge like 120 colour sets. And honestly, you could probably do this with like really cheap art supplies or really cheap colouring pencils like made for children, because at the end of the day, it's the artist, not the tools. I know the tools do help, but I think with this style of drawing, it is literally just about the pencil pressure and blocking out shadows. As you can see, I'm trying to still find like the minor details in the face, and we'll come back when I go to a darker pencil. Okay, so we're on to the last pencil now, and we're really going to dig down on the detail at this point and find every nook and cranny without overdoing it. Instead of choosing a darker pink, I've chosen a red because there'll be a slight hue shift and the shadows will really pop against the pink now. Again, just really layering on top those dark zones of the face and making sure the edges of those shadows are coming through a little bit stronger. I think a simple way to explain this is if you look at the reference, every shadow that is really like black is what I'm colouring in red. So for example, the nostrils are going to be super dark because they're just holes and no light can really reach them unless the light is underneath the person. These points will be really dark. Same goes for the lips, where the top lip and the bottom lip converge into one. Not a lot of light is getting in between there, so that'll also be really dark. And I think that's gonna about do it for the first portrait. The next part of the video will be a time lapse doing a portrait in a colder colour, only using 2 blues. So I'm gonna let you finish up watching the rest of this portrait and we'll see you in the time lapse. We've talked a lot about using a single colour for a portrait, so I thought it was only right to show you how I mix both the colours in kind of a gradient way. And this can work horizontally, vertically, or like at an angle. It can work however you want. All it is just blending 2 colours from top to bottom or side to side. And since we drew 2 younger people, I decided I really want to draw an old man, as I think when you get older, the facial structure changes and it makes for an interesting portrait. Again, just starting off mapping out the face with the pink colour that I used in the red portrait, and only filling in the shadows of the eyes and upper half of the face in pink, leaving the beard and lower nose for the blue shadows. As I'm approaching the blue shadow, you want to make sure you're not going too dark over the pink so that it muddies the colours. You can swap between each colour and simultaneously blend them in together. The lighter strokes, the better. So I think at this point this one's pretty like visually explanatory, so I'll just let the music play and we'll see you at the end of the video. Hello, it's me again. That is it for portrait number 3. Hope you've enjoyed, learned something along the way. Comment your favorite portrait out of the 3 down below. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.